Hello, everybody. Tonight, I wanted to do a quick study on basically the semiconductor industry. Wanted to look at some details of what's going on. If you're familiar with the semiconductor industry, it's actually the perhaps second largest industry. Electronics in general is the second largest industry on Earth. It's more than vehicles, almost twice as much as vehicles. See, it's basically $3 trillion. You can see business services and travel and tourism is basically the largest sector. But after that, most of the other sectors are between $2 and $3 billion. But electronics in general is huge. So I wanted to look at what's going on in the electronics industry and come up with some surprising discoveries. So what I found is actually pretty surprising. Actually, China's doing most of the exports of in the electronics industry, then Taiwan, then South Korea. But after that, most people are familiar with China, Taiwan, and South Korea, but not a lot of people are actually familiar with Vietnam. And actually, Vietnam is doing as much or as more than even South Korea. And I was even surprised comparing it to Taiwan. You can look at Taiwan and Vietnam basically having similar amounts of exports, same order of magnitude, as well as Malaysia. So I was familiar with Malaysia, but I wasn't familiar with how much is actually going on in Vietnam. So I wanted to look at carefully what's going on there. In Vietnam, so if you type in Vietnam here for exporter, you'll get the electronics. And who are they exporting to? So they're basically exporting a lot of that back to China, and then a lot of that to the United States, and really around the world, into Europe as well as Australia and the rest of the world. So, and then if you look at the imports, they're basically importing almost everything from the electronics side from Asia. Looks like almost all of that memory is coming from South Korea, and then they're also getting a lot of stuff from China. So, but what is really going on? So I wanted to look at some of the footprints. So I went through and asked the AI, this is Gemini 3, what's going on? So you can see, you're probably familiar with Shanghai and Shenzhen. But Shenzhen is basically the world's major producer. It's pretty obvious if you look at Shenzhen. We can kind of look at some areas here on the map, but I'll go to Shenzhen really quickly so you can see where this is. And there's basically two major ports, but this gives you some idea of the scale of what the electronics industry is doing. Most of this is electronics. I imagine being shipped out of Shenzhen, and you can see just the size of this. It's probably 5 times the size of the Oakland, but then there's also, so basically where are we first of all? So let's look at this on the Earth. So this port is basically located here in China. It's basically near Hong Kong. So if you're familiar with the south side of China, Shanghai is up here, and then Beijing is up here in the far north. But basically, this port down here is where Shenzhen is. So what's happened in the past is a lot of manufacturing has moved out of Hong Kong into Shenzhen, and then even further into Guangzhou and so on. So, but Shenzhen is still mainly one of the headquarters for a lot of this manufacturing. You can definitely see at this port here, there's quite a lot of stuff going on. So you're probably familiar with some of that in China. Taiwan is interesting too. Let's just look at that really quick. If you're not familiar with this technology park, it's basically a huge technology park, kind of near the airport out near Taipei. So if you're familiar with Taiwan, you basically have what Shenzhen was over here, and then a little bit north and kind of halfway in between Shanghai and Shenzhen is Taiwan, right? And then on the side of Taiwan here. So I want you to get you a look at this, because this is really where the manufacturing is. All these buildings are basically manufacturing buildings for semiconductors. So if I zoom in here, TSMC Fab, you can see Fab here, Fab, Power Chip Semiconductor, MediaTek headquarters, all that. This is all manufacturing, and even some smaller scale manufacturing kind of in this area. So it would be really nice to kind of look. I had done some street view stuff, but we're going to do the street view mostly in Vietnam. So there's this area that I have not really been familiar with. and this is in Vietnam. So, and this is where a lot of that manufacturing is going on. And it's actually surprising how big this area is and how separated it is. So basically, you can see there's some manufacturing going on in these regions right over here, for instance, right back in here, back in here, back in here, back in here. But when you start adding all this up, you basically have quite a large manufacturing base of electronics all happening around this city here. Now, this city is actually near Ho Chi Minh, or sorry, Hanoi, Vietnam, and this near Ha Long Bay, which is really pretty. And there's also some manufacturing of some other kinds of things. But it's really interesting to see this area. I've never even knew about this area until I started doing some research into it. So let's dive in and see what actually is going on in this area. So basically the largest cell phone manufacturing place in the world is in this place. It's for Samsung, actually, which is a Korean company. So basically what's going on is a lot of Korean companies and China and even Intel is loading up on putting a lot of places right here. So let's look at this place right here, and we can find out where that is. Put it on a map. And you can kind of get an idea for the scale of this. So let's first of all zoom out. So we were looking at a different area, and then this is kind of, there's another city right in here I think we were looking at, or up here, Samsung Electronic Manufacturing. So this is another one up there, but this is the one that the map told us about. So there's just these huge areas of manufacturing that they poured in a lot of work. So you can see Samsung is here, Industrial Park, and this is basically where they're making the cell phones. So the interesting thing is I was looking in Korea and they didn't have factories, and I was wondering, well, where's their factories? So it looks like a lot of this is being manufactured even more than in Penang, and I looked at Penang, and you can compare it, and basically this is where the manufacturing base is happening right now. So it was really surprising to see just the vastness of these. So you can do some street view, and what I did is I kind of picked some major intersections. Let's pick this one here. I haven't really looked at this one yet, and you can kind of get an idea for what this looks like. But it's basically a vast industrial park, and the funny thing is they have a lot of scooters in the area, so they'll have scooter parking, and it's basically, these are the different manufacturers here. So let's zoom back out so you can see. The same thing goes on in China. They do these blue buildings like this. So it's kind of interesting in the manufacturing sector. But let's zoom out even further out and see if we can check a look at that other. I think this is the largest one in the world for cell phones. But you can see how organized this is, and it's just huge. Samsung, yeah, so this is probably the one here. I think it says, yeah, but you can kind of get a look. Let's get a look at the factory here size. So some ideas for how big these manufacturing facilities are. But let's go in and actually view what that looks like. So they even got another park up north here, but this is totally different than what we see in Taiwan, Silicon Valley, Shenzhen, or other areas, because it's quite separated, each one of these areas. So that's why it's hard to tell exactly how much is going on. You can't even get street view inside of here. They basically own the entire block inside of here. Looks like they even got maybe private housing for some of their employees. We might be able to get inside here, maybe. But yeah, so this is maybe the front gate of Samsung. But interesting to see. And a lot of scooters actually getting to work in almost all these areas. But give me 1 second here. Hello, so I'm back. My dog might make some noise here, so it might be a little bit difficult. But let's look at what's going on. So you kind of see Street View shows that we can't really even go in and look at what's going on in some of these areas. Let's see, this might be a totally different kind of manufacturing facility up here. But you can see probably created pretty fast and not even, gated almost always. But very interesting to see in basically Vietnam. So what else did the AI tell? So down in here, this is the LG Technology Park. So Foxconn is actually also has a lot of facilities in Shenzhen as well. So I was surprised. Let's look at LG. This is a pretty cool one to see. And zoom in on the LG Electronics. So this is a whole nother area, and you can see, let's look at the size of this. So basically about a couple mile or so of land in there, but this is a lot closer to the waterfront. This is maybe a few miles, 5 miles, 10 miles to the waterfront. But you can see here quite huge manufacturing and LG display, and it might be even one of the largest display ones in the world. When I looked at the street view, I caught a glimpse of what that looks like, and you can see basically a huge building for LG display. And then they kind of got like a little shopping district here. Very different than also in Japan too, like when you see Sony Corp and you look at what's going on, like they're basically in downtown Tokyo. So they're definitely not doing the manufacturing there. They're probably even also depending on places like Vietnam, which is surprising. So it's kind of seems to me like kind of a secret truth about what's going on in the electronics industry. So we basically see Vietnam quite high here, and then as well as Malaysia. Now Malaysia was harder to tell. There's kind of an area called Penang, and then an island. It was pretty condensed, but Vietnam actually shows a lot more areas than. So let's look at Foxconn really quick. Oops. I'm doing QR codes. So let's do Foxconn and search Google for that and then map it. So again, here is a whole nother facility, and look at all this Foxconn stuff, right? So this is motherboards basically, and you can see where we're located. We're also still located on the north side of the city. But maybe a different town, slightly different town than the other ones. So, but it definitely looks like they're doing certain towns are really heavy on electronics, particularly in Vietnam. So let's look right here. This actually looks like the most busiest intersection. So let's look right here just to get an idea. So these are all Foxconn, and again, you get these little scooters going around, and maybe even between one building and the other, kind of transporting goods. And they have sub names, so it's not, they don't always say Foxconn on the side of the building, as you can see. But so it's other companies, perhaps even Vietnamese companies that are doing the manufacturing for Foxconn. Sorry if you can't hear me too well. I noticed my microphone was a little bit far away. But let's go back and look at one last one here for Intel. Now this one is actually, if you notice, it says Ho Chi Minh. That's actually in the south side of Vietnam. So this is really far from where we were looking. This is, but you can see there's other technology companies right next door. So this is the Intel facility, and it's actually quite small comparison. This little district here, but this is near Ho Chi Minh City, basically on the south side of Vietnam. So we were looking primarily up in here on the north side near Hanoi. Let me turn that map off. So we basically were looking like right in there. And then this is the Intel facility. And Penang, Malaysia is totally different. It's basically down into here, and it gets even hotter temperatures. There is pretty good temperature year round. It does get up in the 90s a couple months a year, particularly in Hanoi. I noticed temperature map here you can see, but basically 60s, 70s, 80s, and then it gets a couple months into the year. Basically in the summertime, it gets up into 94 degrees at the hottest, but a pretty good temperature almost year round there. So, and then also I asked it to expand on this and look at more detail about what's going on, and it just went on and on about the electronics companies there. So definitely there is a lot going on in Vietnam. Hope this helped you understand what's going on for the electronics industry globally. Thank you so much.